Where you look, where you touch, where you feel, yeah. you look, where you touch, where you feel, yeah. Can we talk about me and you? Can we talk about the truth? I wanna know, I wanna know. Can we talk about me and you? Can we talk about me and you? Can we talk about the truth? I wanna know, I wanna know. Can we talk about me and you?
Now, in case you missed it, the Prime Minister Christopher
Can we talk about me and you? Can we talk about the truth? I wanna know, I wanna know. Can we talk about me and you? Can we talk about me and
the Prime
you?
Minister Christopher Luxon and French
Can we
President
talk
Emmanuel
about the
Macron.
truth? I wanna know, I wanna know. Can we talk about me and you?
Now, in case you missed it, the Prime Minister Christopher Luxon and French President Emmanuel Macron decided it would be an absolutely swell idea to create a new non-governmental organisation known
Started as a whisper, message from a new world I'd never known. Something about it felt like it'd been waiting my whole life. Is this home? I can hear each sound calling my name, and I feel angels around when I start to sing, and suddenly it feels like heaven is not so far away. Tell me, can you hear the symphony? Panic, panic,
Now, the Coalition's controversial bathroom bill has returned to the public consciousness.
That it's meant to be, that I'm finally right where I'm supposed to. If I let you into the secret, would you listen? I can hear each sound calling my name, and I feel angels around when I start to sing, and suddenly it feels like
I don't wanna say anything, cause if I do I might say the wrong words. Oh no. So I'll keep my mouth shut and not listen. Afraid I lose you if I didn't. Till we find what we're missing and compromise. So I'll keep my shoes on and not leaving. We're on thin ice, winter season. Can't we find a single reason not to say goodbye? Oh, if I said what's on my mind, would you stay with me tonight? If I said what's on my mind, would that make you run and hide? Run and hide. Run and hide. If I said what's on my mind, would that make you run and hide? Would that make you run and hide? Run and hide. Run and hide. Oh, would that make you run and hide? Don't know what to do anymore. I'm out of options, nothing's working. I'm out of service. Come help me now, I'm fucking nervous. I'm trying but can't scratch the surface. So I'll keep my mouth shut and not listen. Afraid I lose you if I didn't. Till we find what we're missing and compromise. So I'll keep my winter season. Can't we find a single reason not to say goodbye? Oh, if I said what's on my mind, would you stay with me tonight? If I said what's on my mind, would that make you run and hide? Run and hide. Run and hide. If I said what's on my mind, would that make you run and hide? Would that make you run and hide?
Clouds are stirring up the sky. I was always in denial of what I saw right in front of me. And every time I'm so damn lost to what I loved and what I lost. But let's get lost in love tonight. Hear a second voice inside my head. It's telling me to say tonight again. And hold on to the words we always said would be forever, forever. Wait another day to clear my thoughts. So jump into a love that won't be forgotten. Forever, forever. Let's run away together. Let's run away together. Swear we'd never say goodbye. Fall asleep to lullabies with something that I thought I'd never find. And what is right and what is wrong, and all I ever saw was love. But let's get lost in love tonight. Hear a second voice inside my head. It's telling me to say the night again. And hold on to the words we always said would be forever, forever. Wait another day to clear my thoughts. feelings. It's like I can't walk on the ceiling. Oh yeah, got me dreaming, dreaming in colors I never dreamed in. Oh yeah, I let you in deeper than I let anyone else before. Fell in love with my broken pieces, took them all and made them yours. Didn't know what my heartbeat needed, skipping out, no I can't keep score. When I lose my breath, boy, you got me breathing. Oh, every little thing you do, every time you hold me, take me higher, higher. Every little thing you do, every time you hold me, take me higher, higher. Oh. Magic. No, I'm never letting go. Now that I have it with you. When you kiss me, it's like the stars fall out the sky onto my heart to cover up what I don't wanna show. I let you in deeper than I let anyone else before. Fell in love with my broken pieces, took them all and made them yours. Didn't know what my heartbeat needed, skipping out, no I can't keep score. When I lose my breath, boy, you got me breathing. Oh, every little thing you do, every time you hold me, take me higher.
Now, in case you missed it, the Prime Minister Christopher Luxon and French President Emmanuel Macron decided it would be an absolutely swell idea to create a new non-governmental organisation known as the Christchurch Call Foundation. Now, the Christchurch Call was originally formed in 2019, led by former Prime Minister Dame Jacinda Ardern in response to the mosque shootings on March 15th. Now, the initiative was intended on working to eliminate violent extremism and terrorist content online, but I think it's moved far beyond that. If you aren't in New Zealand, you may not appreciate just how despised the once idolised Jacinda Ardern is, and by many in this country. And she was clearly an orator who was capable of coercing so many people into going along with whatever it was that she and her government wanted to do. There are only so many lies one can tell before you just start to catch on and realise this is just not viable. This makes no sense. How can we sit here and listen to you? How can we sit here and take you seriously when, as far as I'm concerned, everything you are saying is lip service and your actions aren't following through? Of course, there's still a select few in New Zealand who hold Jacinda Ardern up as some deity, some goddess, somebody to aspire to, someone to inspire the generations. When, as far as I'm concerned, though, of course, that is a view that one could argue is worthy of institutionalisation. Of course, there is still a select few. So how does all of this relate to the Christchurch Call? Well, in short, Ardern didn't place New Zealand first when she was Prime Minister. Everything she does is seemingly aimed at advancing her own ideological position and shaping the world in that image. The issue with this is that she does so at the expense of New Zealand, and at the expense of those who hold a different view, at the expense of free speech, and at the expense of democracy. Ardern was a young global leader alumni, and she spent the better part of 6 years as Prime Minister smiling for the camera whilst working against the national interest behind the scenes. For the most part, she got away with it. Firstly, because we have a heavily left-leaning fourth estate, who, like many people until recently, absolutely loved her. The public service was filled to the brim with like-minded ideologues, and they advanced Ardern's agenda in the shadows. I mean, we only need to look as far as Hei Puapua to realise just how much the public service was willing to advance Jacinda Ardern and her last government's agenda whilst keeping the entire country in the dark, keeping Jacinda Ardern's own coalition partners in the dark back from 2017 to 2020. On top of all this, we come to what is arguably the most egregious betrayal of New Zealanders and our democracy in our history. Ardern's government paid the mainstream media through the Public Interest Journalism Fund, which was $55 million. And they did so to promote an ideological position which undermines our nation's democracy. It was an ideology which promoted the implementation of legislation which does indeed destroy our democracy. In this case, it was inherently related to co-governance and race-based policy. They'd say to the media, hey, look, media, you know how you're struggling. We're going to give you some money. Hope you're okay with that. We're going to give you some money. In return, not only can you not report on what we are saying fairly, not only can you not go out of your way to ensure that everything that we're saying as a government is accurate, but you actually have to promote co-governance. You have to promote the principles which we are using as the underpinning for our co-governance legislation, like Three Waters, for example. You're not allowed to write something that is anti-Three Waters or, based on going against promoting the principles which we decide are going to be doctrine. You see, we look at things like the Te Tiriti o Waitangi principles, and, well, yes, unless the media abides by those principles which, by the way, are fluid, they are malleable if the Waitangi Tribunal has anything to say about it. If the media does not go in alignment with those, if they do not go in alignment with a ideologically implemented set of beliefs, well, then you're going to be in trouble. So, you've got a couple options. You can say no, we won't give you money, and you'll just, you go into bankruptcy faster. Or you can behave yourself. You can accept this money, and you can promote what we want you to. And so, of course, the majority of the media, they said, yeah, sure. And for the following few years, not only did everything the media do promote ideology, it rejected facts. It says, oh yes, we understand that this is a race-based policy which is inherently racist, but we're not going to report it as such. So we're going to report that the opposition to racist policy is indeed the racism. That's what the media did. And this is just the tip of the iceberg type stuff. Our media was dependent on Ardern's government to stay alive. And we can see that more than ever right now as those very media organisations which relied on Jacinda Ardern, relied on the Labour government to bail them out, are now going under. When we look at News Hub, they're gone burger. Look at One News, they haven't cut staff. Bye-bye Sunday, bye-bye Fair Go. Ardern had the fourth estate in the palm of her hand and maintained control over the narrative for years. To this day, some people call her the greatest Prime Minister we've ever had. But if we actually compare her tenure to that of other Prime Ministers, especially in recent history, she's well near the bottom. And for me personally, I take treason rather seriously. And so, in my book, she's dead last. But of course, it gets worse. Ardern opted to hire a group of far-left radicals known as the Disinformation Project. They're a research group who has famously claimed that white women who braid their daughters' hair, do a bit of knitting, are white supremacists, or at least potentially white supremacists. I know. And according to the Daily Examiner, the Disinformation Project, the director of the Disinformation Project has stated the following: Marxism, feminism, post-colonial theory, these are the tools I use every day in my work and in the construction of my identity. Ironically, despite this being inherently radical in nature, she and the Disinformation Project were tasked with assessing what was and was not online disinformation and what was and was not radical or extremist in nature. The group also contributed in the creation of a propaganda film, made by Stuff Circuit, and also part of the Public Interest Journalism Fund. And it was a true display of how Ardern utilised what was available to her to control the narrative, hide her failures, and demonise those who stood in the way of her achieving her ideological goals. Furthermore, the Disinformation Project has been utilised as a tool to justify initiatives like the Christchurch Call, justify hate speech legislation, which the last Labour government wanted to implement. And it would have severely impacted the freedom of speech rights of New Zealanders. I would very likely not be allowed to make the video I'm currently making. And that's the severity we're talking about here. We're using a bunch of Marxist radicals to determine what is and is not okay. Anything that's remotely right of their far-left extremist ideology is viewed as far-right extremist ideology. Myself, I can sit in the centre all I like. That's not going to stop them. That is not going to stop them from saying, that is hate speech, you should be locked up for it. You should at the very least have anything associated with this video removed from the internet forever. Additionally, the Disinformation Project was key in shutting down certain narratives around the government's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. You see, if you actually follow the COVID-19 pandemic in as neutral a way as you possibly could, or, I don't know, just as someone with eyes or something, you may have realised that despite all the talk, despite all the so-called admiration from around the world, we did an abysmal job. It's all well and good preventing us from dying in 2020 and 2021, but on a per capita basis, we're middle of the pack. Last I looked, New Zealand's deaths per million were like 100 and something in the world. I think it was like 115th or something like that. It's not very good. There are so many more countries that have done better in that respect. Now, we consider and call it, oh, we don't report as well. Or we do report better than others, and as such, our deaths look worse. Sure. But that's not even factoring in the actual harm we did to our nation, be it the economic harm, be it the health harm, because people had really important surgeries delayed forever. They were unable to get the healthcare support they needed when they needed it. There was an extreme amount of backlogs in pretty much every area of the health system you can think of. I myself, I'm waiting on a list for a pain clinic. Now, pain clinics are a little bit more niche than your average bit of healthcare, but, you know, I have to wait 9 months for that. I waited around about 9 months just to see a cardiologist. Now, and I'm sure you can understand what I'm alluding to when I need a cardiologist at my age. There is so much that the last Labour government has to answer for, but Ardern expertly used the media to prevent that discussion really taking place. It was a matter of, if you oppose what the government did, because the narrative is that we are the best government in the world when it comes to handling COVID, well, then you're a conspiracy theorist, you're an extremist, you need to be shut down. Anything you say is not acceptable. At the end of the day, without a few radical Marxists like the Disinformation Project, Jacinda Ardern would not have been so successful in conning millions of people for years. And we're not just talking about millions of people in New Zealand. No, she conned millions of people around the world. Ardern's track record is one of deceit. She is hidden from accountability and positioned herself as the face of online censorship on a global level. This is the woman who controlled the better part of 5 million people, and the woman who lied to those very same people for many, many years. The woman who worked against the best interests of those people. And she is going to be the face of online censorship for pretty much the entire world that wants to involve themselves with the Christchurch call. Don't be mistaken. This isn't just about the likes of Brenton Tarrant and ISIS with their propaganda beheading videos. This isn't just about the very real threats to governments and public safety. No, this is a stepping stone towards a world where global leaders devolve powers, or at least devolve the decision-making right to unelected globalists sitting around a table, taking the views of radical Marxists as gospel, and then formulating policy that the rest of the world should adopt. Formulating policy that the likes of Meta should adopt, the likes of X should adopt. That's where this goes. It's saying, hey, look, you guys, you should come here. You should participate in the Christchurch Call Foundation. You should invest in the Christchurch Call Foundation. You should have a look at us, see what we recommend, and do absolutely everything we say because we're moral. We're the future. And to be fair, if the globalist agenda is anything to go by, if you subscribe to that, well, then this is far more of a threat than you actually realize. Because if, as Klaus Schwab very concisely put, he's penetrated the cabinets. And if he has indeed penetrated the cabinets as he has said, well, it's not going to be very hard for one of his young global leader alumni to attract those who have penetrated into the cabinets of global governments and get them to participate in whatever the Christchurch Call Foundation recommends. But it is for these very reasons that our Prime Minister, Christopher Luxon, has made a very serious error. He's taken the Christchurch Call further and he's legitimised it. What he should have done was just remove Ardern as New Zealand's special envoy and defunded it. Not very difficult. Instead, he's turned it into a foundation with Jacinda Ardern as its patron. But here's what really gets under my skin, and it really should get under yours too. When speaking to Chris Lynch of, Christchurch's newsroom, Prime Minister Christopher Luxon outlined that the evolution into a foundation was Jacinda Ardern's idea. The Prime Minister who we elected to right the wrongs of Jacinda Ardern's government, to right the wrongs of her complete failure of her government, has turned around and given her exactly what she wants. Another opportunity to control the masses through manipulation of the media. Now, the Coalition's controversial bathroom bill has returned to the public consciousness in recent days and weeks, reigniting a pre-election debate. Back in September 2023, during the TVNZ Young Voters debate, NZ First candidate for Hutt South, Lee Donoghue, left the women around him looking absolutely dumbfounded as he was grilled on a rather simple belief. Males should use men's toilets. Females should use women's toilets. And anyone not complying with these expectations should rightly be held accountable. Unfortunately for Lee, and seemingly the country, if I'm concerned, the ladies were not at all impressed.
From actually participating now into sports.
Though, on the topic of public bathrooms,
yes.
Where is your evidence?
There's studies all over. We have people basically saying to us, hey, I was assaulted in a bathroom by a biological male. This is wrong. And, you have biological men getting changed in women's spaces. And it's scaring women. But it's a true thing. It's a real thing. We're not on another planet. There are a lot of people concerned with this, not just in New Zealand, all over the world. And we want to stand up for women. We want to stand up for women's spaces. We want to make sure everyone's safe. With
your bathroom policy, particularly at schools, how are you going to enforce it? Are you going to get teachers to, do genital checks at the door, or...?
What a stupid question. No, I think...
Then how?
That's ridiculous. And, making a mockery out of this and women's spaces is just uncalled for. And the pendulum's gone so far to the radical left, you think this is normal. This is not normal. All we're doing is sticking up for women.
If you want a new law, how are you going to enforce it? In schools?
Look, bathrooms are already unisex, male and female, right? We're just going to say, hey, we're not going to accept this.
Now, I'm not surprised at all that the clearly biased debate moderator by the name of Anna Harcourt, who has also worked on behalf of Renews, which is part of the One News TVNZ type ordeal. But Renews is what I would call a heavily left-leaning young voters propaganda outlet, or news propaganda outlet. And anyway, she's involved with that. She was moderating this, I should say, or rather, technically chiming in on the debate, given she was so outraged at the suggestion that a man should go to a men's room and a woman should go to a women's room. But hey, what are you going to do? But anyways, I'm not surprised that she only managed to summon an inherently flawed question, which infers the proposed policy is completely ridiculous and unenforceable. Admittedly, it was quite effective, given that her target audience of this particular debate are, prone to confirming their own biases by grasping onto whatever narrative suits it. And it doesn't matter how flimsy it is. They just want to be affirmed in whatever it is they believe in, however they identify, for example. Now, the Fair Access to Bathrooms Bill, which is guaranteed support by National ACT and New Zealand First being the ones who drafted it, has guaranteed support through to the select committee stage, at which point it's kind of up in the air what's going to happen. I strongly suspect that at the very least National is not going to see it through to either the second or third reading because they've gone woke. National, as far as I'm concerned, are going to be no better than Labour when it comes to this issue, although they have at least made some steps with respect to their rhetoric around RSE education in the schooling system and making sure that we address that and keep it very, very basic and not go into a bunch of shit we don't need to. That being said, I don't see them supporting this, and I certainly don't see ACT supporting this given, well, the ACT party is basically a libertarian's dream because they're right on the economic scale but really left on the social scale. And as far as libertarians are concerned, as long as you can put up with some right-wing policy, beautiful, absolutely lovely. And I think that's why they're probably a little bit more appealing to young voters than the likes of New Zealand First, because young voters are typically more liberal, they're typically more libertarian. I myself, I've got elements of libertarian that I subscribe to, but hey, what are you going to do? I don't subscribe to ACT because I think that, drag queens reading to children is, well, quite frankly, not my cup of tea, and I don't think it should happen. Now, do I have an issue with clowns reading to children? No, because clowns aren't there reading in a sexualized manner or reading about things inherently related to sexuality and identity of which these children cannot even begin to comprehend. Although they can be successfully indoctrinated in that process, but I'm kind of in a state of digress right now. Now, the bill would introduce a monetary penalty under the Summary Offences Act for breaching this policy. I think that's more than reasonable. Hey, look, you've gone into the wrong toilet for whatever reason. Maybe it's because you're wearing a wig. Maybe it's because you think you have a cock when you don't. Maybe you do have one and you shouldn't be in there because you do. Anyways, you get a fine. Whoop-de-doo. Deal with it. Instead of getting a fine, maybe you should go get some surgery. I don't know. I think Bangkok does some decent surgeries every now and then. Nonetheless, it not only introduces this monetary penalty for breaching the rules, but it also says that new public bathroom facilities would also need to accommodate a unisex option. So really, this means you've got no excuse for breaching that penalty. You've got no excuse for getting that penalty, I should say, because there is going to be a unisex option in all new or in all places where it's possible. And so when you're building a new public building, for example, new public facility, it's, you work around that with that in mind, of course. So you have the unisex option. And this is contrary, funny enough, to the reports from the press. That's what they're called, the press. I think they're also called the Post. I'm not quite sure what the differentiation is or who specifically owns it. But the press titled their story, Winston Peters wants to ban unisex bathrooms. It's almost like they've never read the policy, given that unisex bathrooms being mandated in every new build related to public facilities. I mean, come on. This is simple stuff. If you call yourself a journalist, you can't even get things that simple correct. When I saw that, I was like, how is this not being taken down yet? And I'm not even sure, as of recording this, that it has been taken down yet. I mean, it's a blatant lie in the headline. A complete lie. It completely misrepresents the policy to mean the opposite of what it actually is, which, as far as I'm concerned, is extremely concerning. And it probably just goes to show that the media has no shame. They've got no interest in telling the truth, only sharing whatever it is that floats their boat. Now, the purpose of the bill really shouldn't be a partisan issue. I mean, it's 2024. Why is it so hard to acknowledge that women are women and men are men? Look at me. Would you think for a second that I'm a woman? Some might. I know some like to call me a bitch on occasion. But I'm neither a dog nor a woman, so it makes it, or female, I should really say. So that makes it a little bit more difficult. Of course, it is disconcerting that during the election campaign, our now Prime Minister labelled this policy on another planet, and that kind of alludes to why I don't think National will follow through after the first reading and after the Select Committee stage. Oddly, this is something he has in common with the LGBTQ plus charity Inside Out. Inside Out, by the way, work in our schools indoctrinating our children with the relationships and sexual education guideline nonsense. And as far as I'm concerned, they exist for the sole purpose of indoctrinating Kiwi kids with gender ideology. And if you've seen that app, The Birds and the Bees, or whatever it's called, or Beyond the Birds and Bees, which I did a couple of videos on my YouTube channel going into that, if you want to have a look at those as well. That really goes into what the birds and the bees are, beyond the birds and the bees are, and it is disgusting. The fact that this app, which is intended for people 12 plus, is readily available, encouraged for kids without parental supervision to read, is, well, exactly why the likes of Inside Out are a problem. Anyways, Inside Out's managing director Tabby Besley has labelled the policy ridiculous and an attack on transgender people. It seems that having the option of a unisex bathroom to accommodate someone who doesn't necessarily view themselves the way others do is an attack, rather than a solution to the issue. Tabby Besley also stated, "We need to be supporting them to feel safer in New Zealand, not threatening blatantly discriminatory legislation and arrests for people using public facilities. Something as simple as being able to pee, it's something everyone should be able to do freely. I agree. I think we should all be able to go pee freely. Now, as a man, I can pee behind a bush. I can pee in a bush. I've done a couple of things in a bush. But, I can go pee next to the tree over there like a dog. I can also pee in the men's room and in the unisex toilets. What I can't do is freely use the women's toilet to pee, as it should be, because that makes them uncomfortable. And I don't know about you, any other men, sometimes when you walk into a bathroom that a woman's just used, sometimes it just doesn't smell right. Maybe it's just the scent of men's urine that really makes us feel comfortable. I wouldn't actually know. But, yeah, you get my point. There is absolutely no justification for a male, someone born male, because you're only born one way or the other. Some people are born intersex, and that's a little bit more complex. Nonetheless, that's such a minority, it's not even funny. But that aside, you've got no excuse for not using the toilet, which is appropriate for you to use. In this case, if you're a man, use the men's room. Now, in recent months, the conflict regarding Israel and Palestine, that whole narrative has dramatically shifted. Look, there are people who have been firmly in one camp or the other since October 7th, and to the same measure, there have been those, such as myself, who have just been kind of sitting back and sifting through all the BS. For just a moment, forget about the bombs. Forget the reality of what's going on. Forget all of that. Right now, the biggest fight is over the narrative. And in that fight, I would have to argue Hamas is very much on top. Since October 7th, aided of course by the retaliation by Israel, Hamas has gone from slaughtering 1,200 Israelis in cold blood to convincing Israel's allies that it is those who cheered on that slaughter who are the victims. That it's Israel who are the oppressive ones, the colonial entity who want to eradicate Palestinians from the face of the earth. Now, I'm not going to pretend that there aren't radical Zionists out there. Be them average citizens, be them politicians. I'm not going to pretend. However, we can't take the views of the few and paint everyone with that massive brush. Recently on the Belushi Network, we had Juliet Moses on the Belushi podcast. Now, Juliet Moses is the spokesperson, or is a spokesperson, for the New Zealand Jewish Council. And she elaborated on what Zionism is. And she outlined that Zionism is the right to self-determination in their ancestral land, the right for the state of Israel to exist. Now, of course, with any belief system, some people will adopt a radical view of it. And it's those few who, as far as I can see, that are the cause for this misconception around what Zionism is. The same can be said for Islam. Just because Islamic Jihad cite Islam as the reason, the justification for their terrorism, that doesn't mean that the average Muslim down at your local mosque is in agreement. That doesn't mean that they condone all of the terrorist acts. That doesn't mean they condone the beheadings by ISIS. That doesn't mean they condone any of the violence perpetrated by radical Islamic groups. There is a distinction between a radicalization that is rooted in a particular religion or ideology and the ideology in its purest form. Now, holding double standards will never improve outcomes for anyone. It won't resolve the situation in Israel or in Gaza, and it certainly won't do you, yourself, personally, any favours whatsoever. Now, some of you may believe that Israel has responded to genocide by Hamas with a genocide of their own. And I'll admit, seeing the death unfold, that is what you would probably think on face value. Seeing all the destruction in Gaza is, quite frankly, horrific. And resorting to the conclusion that Israel is committing a genocide is very logical on face value. But as the saying goes, never judge a book by its cover. Often the relevant context you need is within the book itself. Without reading it, you remain actually clueless as to the true intent. You remain clueless as to the true depth, the facts, the story, what is really happening. Sure, read the back cover, look at the front cover. Do you actually know what happened? Or are you just making an assumption based on very limited information? What is the difference between Israel's response and what Hamas did on October 7th? Intent. On October 7th, Hamas marched their way into Israel and indiscriminately slaughtered Israelis in the hundreds. Men, women, children, all in cold blood, and in the name of opposition to Jewish existence. In the name of opposition to the fictitious oppression perpetrated by the Jewish people. That was their motive. And the more we in the West pretend Israel's response holds the same intent, the more we divide ourselves. And isn't that exactly what groups like Hamas would want? Groups that hate the West, that hate everything to do with anything not consistent with their ideology, and will go to the complete genocidal intent that they showed on October 7th to suppress any ideologies contrary to theirs. But hey, you might say, Eerjk, 34,000 people have died though. And sure, 34,000 deaths is a big number, and each and every one of those is a tragedy. Be them women, children, elderly, men, the terrorists themselves. Every single human life lost is a tragedy. Now, do I think Israel shouldn't kill the terrorists who want to kill them? No, of course not. But they are still a fallen soul, and that is undeniably a tragedy. But it's when you place the deaths into perspective that any claim Israel is committing genocide simply does not hold up. Any claim Israel's intent to wipe out Palestinians from the earth simply is not true. Gaza has a population in excess of 2 million people. Now, despite having 2 million people in an area that is only 365 square kilometers big, and with the majority of buildings either being damaged or destroyed, only 34,000 people have died. For context, Auckland is over 3,000 square kilometres large and only has about 1.5, less than 2 million people, that's for sure, despite being so many more times bigger. According to numbers reported by the UN as of May 8th, there are 10,000 people who are classified as missing or under the rubble. Now, of those that we can confirm are dead, 7,800 are children, 5,000 are women, and 2,000 are elderly. The remaining 9,000 are men. Hamas, who are reportedly 20 to 25,000 strong, are included in these numbers, though the exact number is hard to know for certain. The IDF claims the number of Hamas members they've killed is over 14,000, and based on the numbers reported by the UN, we can deduce such a claim is more than plausible. Hamas themselves have claimed that 70% of the deaths are women and children, yet the evidence does not support this. The UN numbers would place it at 37% if we were to include the 10,000 who are yet to be identified, and 53% if we base it solely on those who have been identified. Hamas also claimed that 20% of the deaths are their own members. And odds are they're understating that number, just as they have overstated the numbers for women and children. The biggest issue with the number from Hamas is that it means that, if not all of the men, most of the men who have died are members of Hamas. Could we then establish that at least 9,000 of the 24,000 identified deaths are members of Hamas? If so, then the civilian to combatant ratio is 1.5 to 1, meaning for every Hamas member killed, 1.5 civilians lose their lives. And I'm not the first person to reach that conclusion. On average, in modern conflicts in urban areas, up to 9 civilians die for each combatant. As far as this conflict goes, not only are the IDF not committing genocide at all, but they are consciously acting in a manner designed to keep civilians safe, designed to keep civilian casualties well below what is typically expected in such a conflict. Back in 2020, the Tauranga City Council was replaced by a commission. This was ordered by the then Minister of Local Government, Nanaia Mahuta, shortly after she and the Labour Party won their first ever one-party majority in MMP. Mahuta wrote to the council in early December 2020, and basically she expressed that it was her intention to replace them with a commission due to a number of governance problems amongst the elected representatives. Now, the minister decided that the council's response to this was just not sufficient, and it didn't provide any evidence or it didn't provide any confidence that they were able to actually overcome these issues. And as such, she decided to go through with it, and she just decided, hey, look, you elected representatives, you're gone, I'm putting in my own people, and well, that was that. Originally, the commission was only supposed to be in place until 2022, when the triennial local authority elections came around. However, the minister, again, decided to maintain the commission and avoid a change in policy direction. The commission believed that under a return to elected democracy, a change in strategic direction may jeopardise relationships the commission has established with public and private funding contributors. It would also result in inability to deliver on planned projects within Tauranga City and across the wider region. In short, the then Minister of Local Government opted to retain an unelected commission because she agreed with the policy direction. Hypothetically, what if the people in Tauranga oppose projects being delivered in the city? Nanaia Mahuta believes that doesn't matter. It's what she and the commission want that matters the most. Of course, these commissioners are on a very healthy several $100,000 salary, and so they're probably very keen to remain in the position, irrespective of the actual value of whatever they're doing. So, in short, Tauranga wasn't given the opportunity to democratically elect their representatives in 2022 like the rest of the country, no. Instead, their representatives dictated to them. And irrespective of whether they agreed or not, the commission remained, and lo and behold, here we are. Now, next year, the local government elections are happening all over the country again. But like 2022, Tauranga is not going to be involved. Now, the reason they're not going to be involved is because their local government elections are in July this year. They're having them now instead of waiting an extra year. And then in 4 years from now, when it comes around to the next run of local government elections, they will rejoin the cycle and, have elections in alignment with everyone else. So, here is the big question. Will those elected do a better job than their predecessors? Will Tauranga be begging for a government-appointed commission in the future? Will they say, hey, look, you guys can start dictating to us who governs us because whoever we've just elected isn't working out again? Who knows? Perhaps. But here is the big question. Will those who are elected this time around do a better job than their predecessors? Will they do a better job than the commission? Well, a big part of that is the mayor going to be competent? Whoever they elect as mayor, are they going to be able to do the job that needs to be done? Are they going to be able to get the council working despite the fact they might have differences in policy objectives? Now, the race for mayor is always the highlight, the headline act of any local election. And one particular candidate in Tauranga has caught my eye. But they haven't caught my eye for the right reasons. Ria Hall, a singer-songwriter, born and raised in Tauranga, done a lot of great things, has shown her hat in the ring. And she's proclaimed that it's time for a change. On that point, I wholeheartedly agree. However, change for the sake of change isn't necessarily a good thing. And Hall is known as a quote-unquote tireless advocate for social justice, Indigenous rights, and environmental sustainability. That aside, having read materials related specifically to her mayoralty bid, her vision And this change she speaks of, I've found it rather uninspiring. I can't identify anything particularly radical or concerning, and it does suggest that she's approaching this opportunity with a vision. Unfortunately, it's only a vision, and nothing but a vision. I can't see a single policy outlining how she intends to achieve all of her outlined priorities. For example, she intends to govern with holistic economic management. Through good management and clear leadership, we don't have to choose between well-being for people and the environment and a prosperous economy. That is all well and good. But how do you plan on achieving all of that? At this point, holistic is just a buzzword. And in practice, what policy, be it at the local or national level, is ever implemented in a holistic way? I highly doubt that those who use it even know what it means. From what I can see, the rest of the priorities Ria Hall has outlined thus far are, well, no more substantive than the first one. And there certainly doesn't appear to be any specific plan to achieve them. However, with all this being said, it isn't even the lack of substance that piqued my interest, nor the fact that she's a singer-songwriter. Couldn't care less. What I find to be the most bizarre and arguably damning thing about Ria Hall's candidacy is who she chose as her campaign manager. Ria, in what is arguably the most important decision she will make in the pre-election stage, has shown she has terrible judgment. And to any voters that may very well see who she has appointed as her candidate, it may turn them off immediately. It may suggest to them, this woman hasn't thought through anything. If this is the kind of judgment she's going to make as the mayor, let's steer well clear of that. So who was this choice for campaign manager? Ria decided that in one of the first things she does, the best choice, or the choice that she would settle for, was disgraced former Member of Parliament, former Minister of Justice, Kitty Allen. Now, please don't get this twisted. I have no issue with Kitty Allen being afforded the opportunity by Ria Hall to be a campaign manager. That is up to Ria Hall. But someone currently before the courts on criminal charges is probably not the person you want to be running your campaign if you're trying to become mayor. It just isn't the right look. Now, if we get a few years down the line, it's all kind of gone under the bridge, the consequences, the justice has been served, whatever, I don't really care. You know, she's allowed to move on with her life after making mistakes, and she's allowed to be afforded opportunities by those who want to give them to her. However, right now, she is still before the courts on criminal charges. That is a fact. And if Ria Hall thinks it's the right decision to select her as her campaign manager, that suggests a severe lack of judgment. Now, it's not just the fact that she drove drunk, crashed her car, and then resisted arrest. No. She just so happens to play a pivotal role in the worst government in recent history as well. Hell, you could make an argument that it was the worst government in New Zealand's history. But all in all, what does this say about Ria? One could argue that she is just empathetic, and she is happy to give Kitty Allen an important role in the beginning of her political career, all because Kitty has that experience. Conversely, it suggests an extreme lack of judgment and experience making important decisions. And it's certainly not helped by the fact that as of right now, she hasn't provided much substance in her bid for Mayor of Tauranga. Now, 3 strikes is one of those laws which I very much enjoy debating. Or one of those policies because it once was law, then it wasn't, and now it's going to be again. And so it is so much so one of the policies that I really, really like debating that, well, I wrote an essay at law school. And of course, I was defending it because why would you not? It is the most common sense thing to support, and it's not ridiculously unreasonable. You'd be shocked to learn that the lecturer who marked my essay took a little bit of an issue with it, weren't a fan of my position. And as such, the nonsensical response I got for what was an insignificant introduction to university, if I'm completely honest, well, it was all I needed to know to realise this isn't where I belong. I'm not going to waste my time at a law school if well, I'm getting failed because I held the wrong position on a policy. Now, this was very, very topical at the time. This was right at the point Labor was in the process of repealing it. And so, well, that's why it came up as one of the options. And so maybe when it came up as an option, they were a little bit surprised that I was opposed to it, because maybe they don't think young people are going to subscribe to such, I don't know, common sense beliefs. Funnily enough, actually, in the very, very little Zoom call I was in when we were assigned this essay, I was in there with Jamie Lee Ross. Now, if you don't know what the three strikes law, book concisely, it is a three strikes and you're out approach to criminal justice, which works in stages. For your first qualifying offence, meaning one of 40 violent and sexual offences that result in a strike, you are handed a strike. This carries no additional penalty, and a second strike would mean whatever term of imprisonment a judge hands you must be served in full, and there is no opportunity for parole. If an offender receives a third strike, the judge is required to impose the maximum applicable sentence with no opportunity for parole. With that being said, the maximum sentence may be disregarded for a shorter one if the judge considers it manifestly unjust to do so. Let's take something like aggravated robbery, for example. An aggravated robbery carries a maximum sentence of 14 years. Now, the first time you go in for that, you may get, 6 years, parole after 2, pretty reasonable. The second time around, of course, whatever the judge decides to give you that is not exceeding 14 years, you must do in full. There is no parole. So he may decide that, again, 6 years is appropriate. However, this time you don't have the opportunity for parole at 2 years. You're just there for 6 years, and that's that. On the third occasion, and you get a third strike, well, then you're there for 14 years without parole. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good incentive not to do it. And I'm someone who has met people with 2 strikes and even one individual with 3 strikes, and that was prior to the repeal. And I'll tell you right now, they are not keen on doing it again. Many of them want to get out of the life because of this. Many of them wanted to see it repealed so that they could get out and commit a crime without having to worry about that again. Overall, it is a deterrent. So the clause that I just mentioned, though, the one where it allows the judge to use their discretion to decide it might be manifestly unjust, raises a few issues. And whilst I can appreciate the need for this in outlier cases, they are called outlier cases for a reason. And this clause risks being abused by judges who simply don't agree with the policy. As much as we like to pretend that people working in our legal systems aren't prone to political and ideological biases, ultimately they are. Now, judges with integrity may be able to push those biases to the side, but it would be naive to think that this is the case 100% of the time. As such, being concerned that recidivist offenders may not get the just consequence is very much valid. Ultimately, the last government's attempt to get rid of this policy failed miserably. It's now being re-implemented, and it's better than ever. Despite our little detour to the great criminal world, the great criminal nation of Aotearoa, we are 100% back, and this policy is better than ever. And forgive me for using the word, but it is a far more equitable policy, allowing for more just outcomes across the board. Not only has it added a new violent offence to the list, but it's reducing the benefit of guilty pleas and ensuring that only in circumstances where there is a sentence exceeding 24 months imprisonment is there going to be a strike applied. Admittedly, some of you may disagree and think I'm a bit soft, that perhaps these changes are a little bit soft. I disagree. Not because I don't think harsher approaches would be better in practice, but because I acknowledge the government needs to establish a level of bipartisanship for the policy moving into the future. The genius of the reintroduction of this policy is that it addresses much, if not all, of the concerns initially raised with it that justified repealing it in the first place. By reducing the ammunition available to attack it, you will retain more public support and ultimately keep it low on the opposition's priority to repeal again. With all that being said, the following argument in opposition to the three strikes law made me chuckle. And it was the following. Māori are overrepresented in the group of offenders who have received a strike. Shock. And of course, my first thought was, given Māori are greatly overrepresented in the criminal justice system, I would be extremely concerned if that was not the case. Imagine if Māori were as disproportionately overrepresented in the justice system, and yet they were, let's say, not overrepresented in the amount of strikes. This would suggest that all of their crimes are minor, whereas it's actually very much the opposite. The reality is, and I know this is really hard for some people to hear, but Māori commit more crime than any other ethnic group, period. And we aren't even talking per capita. These are the raw numbers. If we look at court proceedings between December 2017 and December 2023, Māori were involved in 358,424 of them. Europeans had the second largest contribution with 275,847. This is the reality in New Zealand, and it's only made worse when we look at it per capita. Anyone arguing the three strikes laws shouldn't be implemented because Māori would be overrepresented doesn't actually care about Māori. They care about looking just whilst advocating for injustice. That's a core element of progressivism in the West. Look just, look moral at all costs. No matter how nonsensical it is, look just, look moral, because that is what life is all about. No matter how many people you hurt in the process, no matter how many people you oppress through your stupid, stupid ideology. Instead, we should be working with Māori communities. We should be working with them to stop recidivism, to stop the generational cycle of reoffending. But no, that's far too difficult. Why would we do that? We wouldn't be able to grift off this whole, we are victims, this is all the fault of colonization. That would all have to stop. And as such, it's the very people who sit there and pretend, absolutely pretend, that Māori are not to blame for the statistics, which are actually aiding in the statistics remaining as bad as they are. Donald Trump was convicted by a New York jury of 34 counts of falsifying business records, with stuff going on with Stormy Daniels back prior to the 2016 presidential campaign, trying to keep her hush-hush about an alleged affair they had. Now, let's bear in mind, the two key prosecution witnesses were Stormy Daniels, a porn star. You know, I'm not going to hold that against her, but Stormy Daniels, and a convicted perjurer. Perjurer meaning someone that's lied in court. So, you know, I think that's it's an interesting couple of witnesses to have to try and convict someone. Look, there are a lot of people, particularly conservative commentators, even conservative commentators that aren't a fan of Trump, who have called this whole thing a farce, right? They've basically said that there was no way Trump wouldn't be convicted, that everything was designed to convict him, irrespective of the truth. And I have seen some things which would suggest that the whole process used here to get the result that we got was dodgy. And that's from as objective position as I can say. There are a few things here that just don't quite stack up. The thing is, it doesn't really matter. In the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter. And there's a couple of things that have come to my attention since preparing for this that make this a little bit more obvious that it doesn't matter that he's got this conviction. Because since, in the 24 hours after his conviction, his campaign for presidency raised over $50 million. The thing is, these weren't $50 million from small contributors, from large contributors, large donors. No, roughly $54 million from 34 million different people in 24 hours. Now, Joe Biden in the last election got around 80 million votes, right? 80 million votes, allegedly, 80 something. I think maybe it was closer to 90. That many votes. How? Well, I think we can debate dead people for that one. But this is the thing. If Trump in donations alone in a 24-hour period is getting over 34 million donations from 34 million different people, what does that say about people viewing Trump as unworthy of presidency because of his convicted felon status? It suggests they could not care less. In fact, it suggests that he has more support now than he did this time last week. That's the reality here. Trump is actually benefiting from this conviction. Now, the only thing where this will actually be an issue for Trump is if he is sentenced to prison. The problem being is he can only be sentenced to prison if a judge is stupid enough to do it. And let's say this is a maximum sentence he can possibly get of 4 years. 4 years, which in a US context is not very much at all, which means it's really not the most severe thing. The issue with, because he is a former president, there are certain things involved with that which make the logistics of actually having him in prison extremely difficult. It means it's not realistic to have him in prison, because it essentially means that you would imprison a security service person, even if it's on a shift-by-shift basis, with him for the entirety of the time. You'd have Secret Service there with him, in prison, for years. What are the logistics? Do you really think that's reasonable? You really think locking a former US president up with Secret Service for 4 years over something which, if we are completely honest, is so pathetic, petty, and potentially dodgy with respect to the actual process in which the verdict was reached? There are legal experts who think this just simply won't result in jail time. And as such, this is going to be a red tsunami. A red tsunami come November 5th. There is no way in hell Joe Biden is getting a second term as president. It's not going to happen. The guy can't string a sentence together. What I find interesting, though, is many liberals, many Democrat supporters right now, they are celebrating this. They are demonizing Trump as, how dare you be a convicted felon? You're an evil man. No one should vote for you because you are a convicted felon. All these sorts of things, right? Not realizing, not remembering what their own ideological take on felons is. And this is something that I find funny as about like the likes of the Greens and Labour in New Zealand and so forth, is because they will often disregard their own ideological positions in order to demonize those they don't like, which just shows their inherent hypocrisies, right? And just how they are as people. But there was one such self-aware liberal that caught my eye. For once, someone was self-aware. The progressive, in fact, and I mean, very progressive, self-aware. So let's check it out.
It is almost a year to the date since Donald Trump attacked me, and I would say ultimately that did not work out well for him. But I am doing great. On a more serious note, this set of convictions has me thinking about how many people are going to demean and degrade Donald Trump because he is now a convicted felon. And they're going to use that felony status to discredit him as much as possible. And there are many deplorable things worth discrediting about Donald Trump. Let me be the first to tell you. But using felony status and conviction status to do so is going to disproportionately harm Black people, people of color, sex workers, folks that are marginalized in our society through racism and white supremacy. Some of the best people I've worked with are folks that were also convicted of felonies. And now feels like a good time to remember that legality does not equate morality. So while Donald Trump is a horrible person, it's not because he was convicted of a felony, or 34 of them. And using felony convictions to judge people's moral character is only going to reinforce a racist prison system and white supremacy. I understand the urge to celebrate. Believe me, I do. I also understand that a lot of us are still skeptical that this isn't going to change anything. And while we're talking about this, I just want us to be careful about how we talk about it. We don't reinforce racialized tropes while we do it. I love you. Fuck Donald Trump. And I'll talk to you soon.
So, I mean, yeah, this dude, I'm going to call him a dude because that's what he is, has acknowledged that, you know, the progressives in the US in particular, they view it as bad to marginalize people with felonies, marginalize people, or demean people. You know, treat people differently because they've had a felony. Because, of course, that disproportionately impacts minorities. And as such, this individual is pointing out the hypocrisy and using the felony status to demean or devalue Donald Trump, to view him as immoral or treat him that way. Because, of course, that would very much be hypocrisy. And so even crazy people can understand hypocrisy from time to time and be, to some degree, self-aware. So to that person, I respect that video, even if the only reason why you really are wanting that conviction is because you are hoping that it means Joe Biden will win the 2024 election. It simply isn't going to happen. Joe Biden has never looked less likely to win the election. Every poll has supported Trump for quite a while now. It looks like a very, very comfortable win incoming. Sure, things can change. Sure, there could be some untoward behaviors that could result in something not going quite to plan. But I think Trump is just statistically the favorite. I think there can be no question right now. Trump is the favorite to become president of the United States again in November. But the other thing is, and it's alluded to here about how it would disproportionately affect black people and people of color, other people of color, and minorities. And this is the other thing that helps Trump. This is why it helps Trump more, because those same people that are marginalized, those same people who are most impacted by the criminal justice system in the US and so forth, will resonate with this. They will look at this as the powers that be trying to knock you down, keep you down. And as such, we should rally behind you because you are being knocked down. We should rally behind you because you have something in common with us. This Joe Biden guy, he can't even put a string, he can't even string a sentence together, let alone resonate with us. Remember, it was Joe Biden who said poor kids can be just as smart as white kids. So, I mean, he is obviously very out of touch with the, well, non-white community, let alone the community of people who are everyday Americans. But, you know, with all this being said, let's say the hypothetical situation, Trump is sentenced to prison. What happens? Simple. Whoever Trump endorses to take his place wins in a landslide. And in this case, I think the front runner for that will be Ron DeSantis. But given he already has the, well, second most support anyway, and I think people probably look at him as a natural successor once Trump's official, you know, term limit has expired. So you would look at someone like him. Maybe Vivek Ramaswamy would try and contest Ron DeSantis on that, but I think whoever Trump says, that's my guy, that'll be who wins the election in a landslide. Simply because if Trump is put in prison for something that already looks fishy, then there is really no justification whatsoever to vote for the president that imprisoned his political rival that was ahead in the polls and looked almost guaranteed to win the election. So last week, Liz Gunn was found guilty in a New Zealand court of assault. But wait till you see what this alleged assault was. Now, you may have already seen it. If you have, and you haven't reached the conclusion that such a guilty verdict is utterly ridiculous, well then please tell me, how would you feel if you were in that position? Because if this is the new standard for assault in this country, well then I want out, to be completely fucking honest with you. So, let's just quickly go over what I think of Liz Gunn, because some people may be under the wrong impression. I am not for a second a fan of Liz Gunn. Haven't been pretty much since I first heard her speak. Now, when it comes to people and orators especially, you often get a vibe as to whether or not you're going to like them. There are some people that speak in a way which just comes off, let's say, somewhat patronizing, or in a way which just gives you the wrong vibe. Now, of course, that is very, very much subjective. Some people listen to Liz Gunn and get the opposite impression. Nonetheless, whenever I hear Liz Gunn speak, I very much don't like it at all. In fact, the less she speaks, the more likely I am to have sympathy for her cause. And to be fair, elements, or actually many elements of what she believes in, I will agree with to some, in some respect. But that aside, regardless of what I think of Liz Gunn in terms of how she orates herself, and regardless of whether Liz Gunn is someone that you view as morally sound or someone who is in the right with what she's been doing in the last few years, what is abundantly clear is that it doesn't matter what someone believes, they should be treated by the law in accordance with what is fair. And as of right now, I don't believe an actual conviction has been handed down. If it has, then that's my bad. But Liz Gunn was found guilty of assault for the following.
Excuse me.
Could you please?
Excuse me. What is
touch me.
what is the law? What is the law?
Could you please?
If you agree that that is assault, then I can't help you. I really can't help you. The world's lost if we're going to use that as the basis for assault in New Zealand, especially when a certain man by the name of Granny Basher fractured a woman in her 70s eye socket and was discharged without conviction. Sure, they deemed him guilty, but still discharged him without conviction. And so the only just outcome in this situation really is for Liz Gunn to be discharged without conviction. And even then, they should still review the old Granny Bashers case because that is an absolutely repugnant outcome. But I think this speaks to a large issue within our justice system. I mean, seriously, a number of people who are getting slaps on the wrists, fines for things like sexual assault, the list goes on. It is actually becoming a farce. It's not even, I can't even comprehend how the justice system has fallen to these lengths. But right now, a justice system which I have experience with is making absolutely no sense to me. I've met people for, let's say, fracturing someone's eye socket. I've met people who have been given years in prison for that. Yet Granny Basher gets nothing. He doesn't even get a conviction. Someone who gives someone a very light and precious tap on the side of the arm, essentially, for less than 2 seconds, is found guilty of assault. And the thing that annoys me about the verdict, actually, is that, one, the so-called victim claims that it was a 5 out of 10 on the pain scale, apparently. What I know for a fact is that the victim claimed that it was a sharp pain. Now, I don't know about you, but sharp implies that there was a sharpness to the act. Like, we all know why there's a distinction between sharp and blunt, because blunt feels one way, sharp feels another. This was not something which should be creating a sharp pain, let alone a pain at all. We are talking about open palm, zero grip for less than 2 seconds, placed firmly, but with not much force at all, on the side of a woman's arm. By another woman, I might add. That is assault. Yet the police, who quite frankly didn't have any justification to arrest Liz Gunn at all, actually fractured or did a lot of damage to Liz Gunn's wrist. How about that? And admittedly, Liz Gunn was playing up for the camera, as you would, and I probably would in that situation too, because it's absolutely ridiculous that you would be arrested. For one, actually, the main justification for the trespass, for the arrest, I should say, was that they were allegedly trespassing, which wasn't the case. They weren't even given enough time to be trespassing, and that's why the judge threw out that charge. So no, at the end of the day, the only charge that the judge could even attempt to make a ruling on was the one of assault, in which case the judge was barking mad with his decision with that one too. Ultimately, I don't know how anyone could have any faith in the justice system. I certainly don't have any faith in the justice system. I've had it to some degree in the past, but right now I think the justice system is about as inconsistent as NRL refs. If you know, you know. Now, my hot take is that we should get rid of pretty much all of the list seats in Parliament. Just turn them all into electorates. Not only does having more electorates provide more opportunities for other parties to win seats, but it enables a closer relationship with the people who are representing you. And it ensures that every single person in Parliament, or at least the vast majority, are generally speaking representing an actual region, representing people who have elected them to pass law on their behalf. But not just this. I don't just want this. I want to change how we vote in Parliament. I think it's necessary. We need to stop voting as party blocks. Acknowledge that we're members of parties, sure. Acknowledge that these representatives are representatives of this party. However, every single time we vote on a bill, you vote as an individual. You do not vote as a party block, because why on earth would you bother voting for an electorate MP if you just expect them to do whatever the party says? There are people who will vote for their electorate MP, and yet the party will do the opposite of what they voted their electorate MP to do, because they wanted their electorate MP for X. However, they're required to do what the majority of the party want. Sure, you could have your electorate MP lobby their party to say, hey, we should take a different approach, but you can easily get overruled there. And perhaps MPs in that position might just succumb to pressure from within their party to vote accordingly. But I mean, hey, look, if we want a democracy, if we want a representative government that is actually there to vote on your behalf, to work on your behalf, this change needs to happen. And the only way that can realistically happen is by removing list seats. Now, could I see a world, or could I see a middle ground where we have some list seats and the only time that they are activated is when a party reaches a threshold and doesn't get any electorates? Sure. But I think how it is right now with about 50 list seats, that's just not good. I mean, let's look at the likes of the Green Party. I think the Green Party is an absolute clown show. And yet they've only actually got 3 electorate seats. And so if they've only got 3 electorate seats, yet, 12 members in Parliament or something like that, that suggests that there's a lot of people there who people have never heard of, advocating for radical policy and voting what is arguably against the interests of many people in the country. At least if the general public actually voted for the specific individual, then whenever they cast a vote in Parliament, they're doing it on behalf of someone specifically, someone who cast that vote in their favour. It's not a very difficult concept to get your head around, but I think it's the right way. I mean, if we look at the US, for example, the US has a system where the House of Representatives are elected. I don't believe they have list representatives at all. You are the representative of this state. You are the representative of this district, and so forth. That is how it should be. We have the means of doing so. We don't have to increase the number of people in our parliament. We can keep it the same. We just increase the electorates. We just make the electorates smaller. Our population is growing rapidly anyway. Each electorate is going to get larger and larger naturally. It's going to have more and more people. We need to get to a point where the number of people in our electorates aren't too excessive. And by having more electorates, you can keep that number down. Look, I don't think this is an unreasonable position. I don't think this is an unreasonable suggestion. I simply think that people need to be getting into Parliament on the merit of actually resonating with the public, not having, let's say, a Chloe Swarbrick at the front of the Green Party and a Tamitha Paul in the Green Party suddenly coming in and appealing to a bunch of young people, and all of a sudden a bunch of radicals you've never heard of suddenly have a platform to do stuff. You know, as much as I oppose the Māori electorate seats, and I think they should be abolished as soon as possible, you can see the likes of Hannah Rafferty, Maipi Clark, actually being elected by the constituents of that electorate. Now, do I think those electorates should exist and therefore she shouldn't be there? Well, you know, that's a question to be had. But that aside, she was still elected, and for that you have to respect her position and her standing. She has far more credibility to be in Parliament than the likes of Darlene Tana, who is, well, as we all know, Darlene Tana is under investigation for potentially being involved with migrant exploitation. But that's the Green Party for you. They're not very good at behaving themselves. Now, we should be moving in a direction where in order to be a representative in our Parliament, you must be elected. You must have someone in the public go up to the voting booth and put a tick next to your name. Not the party's name, your name. That should be your ticket. That should be your ticket into governance. That should be your ticket into Parliament. And it should not be any other way. In the wake of Māori political independence, all of the nonsense with Te Pāti Māori, and with all the discussions going on about whether we need to become a republic, whether or not we need a constitution, I think now's the time that we have a discussion about a constitution, what that would look like. Now, I'm no constitutional expert, okay? I don't know the exact way that a constitution is constructed, how I would go about doing that. I'm sure every single constitution ever in Britain is different in some way, whether that's how it's formulated, how it's created, how it's voted on, how it's implemented, all of these things. Nonetheless, I think there is merit. There is merit to us implementing a written constitution rather than the uncodified constitution that we currently have made up of a range of different documents and so forth. And I think this is reasonable, and I think it's a discussion we need to have. Firstly, do we need to become a republic? Well, I think that's something that we should just vote for in the process of this. I really don't lean one way or the other. I do feel like there is a level of stability or a level of culture associated with being a constitutional monarchy as we currently are. Though I don't feel like there is anything really requiring us to retain that. And if the general sentiment is that we don't, then I'm fine with that. I'm okay with that. And so that would be something that 100% in the process of creating a constitution that we vote on. And if it's voted that we don't retain our recognition of the monarch as the head of state and that we become a republic, then so be it. And that can literally be a key underlining factor in the constitution in it of itself. Now, of course, because of all of the stuff with Te Pāti Māori and effectively they don't recognise the monarch despite Te Tiriti o Waitangi saying it, we don't have to regard Te Tiriti o Waitangi in any way in this constitution whatsoever. We just don't. I mean, there is one element, one version of this we could make that does include it. Wouldn't dramatically change it, but it would be far more contentious. But we don't need to include that at all. And especially if Te Pāti Māori are going to go and make their own parliament, why would they care anyway? They're not going to be involved with our government. They're not going to be involved with our constitution. So why would they care? Doesn't matter. So, there is no real reason in the current climate, especially with the way things are going, for us to include that at all. If you disagree, I'd love to hear it, but I don't think we need to include that. And if we did, we would obviously be more likely to just say, hey, look, we want to acknowledge the right of this government to create laws and be elected by us. And we want to acknowledge the rights of all people in this country to have equality, right? And of course, that for us to all have equal standing is probably the best way to say it. And so there are some principles that we can take. There are some ideas that we can take from Te Tiriti o Waitangi itself that we could implement in how we view each other in this country. That's always important. There's lessons to be learned in everything. But outside of that, we already know that the uncodified constitution we currently have, made up of several different documents, pieces of legislation, already includes things like the Human Rights Act, the Bill of Rights Act, and all these things. And that's important. But I think we don't regard the Human Rights Act as a constitutional piece of legislation, do we? I mean, most people probably don't even know that we have a constitution. Most people I talk to are unaware, or they don't view a uncodified constitution as having the same standing as something like a written constitution. And so I think that's another good reason to have one, or to create one. So we can take very, very key parts from the Human Rights Act, from the Bill of Rights Act, and put those into our written constitution and have them constitutionally recognized very explicitly. And say, this is a constitutional right, not just a human right, not just a right recognized under human rights or the Bill of Rights legislation. It is a constitutional right that we as a people voted for explicitly. So there's merit to that. And that's the same for the range of different things that we could have involved and included within the Constitution itself. Anyway, that can go as far as electoral changes. I think in the wake of a potential moving out of the kind of voting system that we have from the likes of Te Pāti Māori and their supporters, that there would be need for a shake-up in our parliamentary system anyway. I mean, I think now is the time to really consider getting rid of the Māori electorate seats, especially if Māori are going to have their own parliament somewhere. So we don't need those anymore. So if you're going to remove 7 whole seats, then, I mean, now's the best time to make changes to how we elect people. And I think MMP's run its course. I noticed I'm only 24, so forgive me, okay? MMP came in before I was born. First past the post is something, whilst I've looked into a little bit and understood a little bit when I was learning about MMP, I didn't really understand it to the level that I thought I did. And as such, when I was explaining a couple of weeks ago that we should no longer have list MPs, I didn't quite realize that effectively I was just describing first past the post. And I realized with that, the reason why people wanted MMP was because of because it made, the proportion of votes to seat ratio in Parliament, proportionate, made it proportionate. Proportional representation, I believe is the term. However, of course, as I was explaining in a video following that, and it was just a reply to someone, I think gone are the times where we should start viewing proportional representation as something that's on an individual level. I think a community level suffices. For me personally, I see a lot of merit in the system that the US uses, and And look, you may disagree with that. I mean, the US is a very, very complex and messed up place, and they are a very partisan place. But at the same time, I feel like the the pros of every single MP being elected by name to represent a certain community outweigh the cons of, you know, let's say 60% of the population voting for one party, but another party winning 60% of the actual seats, right? And I think that's just a consequence. At the end of the day, I think it's more important that communities as a whole are represented than individuals. Because individuals, you don't know the true intentions of individuals. They may be self-centered. If the whole community is rallied behind a candidate for whatever reason, there is likely a reason for it. Be that just a inherent ideological trait of the community, be that a community is in desperate need of a particular of a particular thing that a politician is promising. There are reasons why communities will rally behind one candidate or another, and I think those should outweigh the whims of the individual, personally, because ultimately, politics is something that involves everyone. And if we view politics and approach politics from an individual perspective rather than a perspective where we come together and discuss what is best for our community and try and engage in discussion respectfully and get the best for all of us, then I think we're missing the point. I don't think we're actually getting the best results for everyone unless we're forced to actually lobby our own community to get the results that we want. You're forced to lobby. You're forced to engage with your community without ensuring next time around that they listen to you. You need to explain to them why it's beneficial for them to vote for the person you want them to vote for. Why it's beneficial for our community to elect this representative. It's about getting the results for the community because a stronger community is a stronger family. Stronger families have stronger individuals. Stronger individuals, on balance, just lead better lives. All of it works together to benefit the individual, but it's just rather than looking at it from an internal way, it's all external. And so I think stating that only proportional representation can only be, implemented on an individual basis rather than a community basis, I think it's just very self-centered. I think it kind of misses the point. New Zealand has a